And the second thing that essentially I know is, so we call it the modeling layer that we call, it's called a semantic layer. And a semantic layer is
Mhm.
nothing but a business view layer of the data
Right.
itself. The second thing that we do, or I ensure, is essentially to make sure that the key metrics that are used within the organization are very consistently defined within my data layer. And if they're
Mhm.
defined, then there is no question in terms of the data when it goes out for reporting that anyone says, hey, the data that's coming out of our system is incorrect or it does not match what we have, because we ensure that we have the alignment between all of our stakeholders that this is the
Mhm.
right version of what the data should look like. And so it makes for much, much more trusted reporting that comes out of the system. The third thing, and as you all know, like data quality is the cornerstone of anything that
Right.
you build out. So if your data is not of the right quality, any data models that you produce, any AI that you produce is not going to be accurate. And so data quality is of very premium importance. And then, of course, privacy and governance that surrounds the data itself.
Throw your hands up if you with it. Drop it.
Okay. All right. Welcome to another episode of Explore the Opportunities with AI podcast. So, my name is Arena Yu. I am your AI today, and we're absolutely privileged to dive into the world of data with our exceptional guest, Meenal Iyer. So, Meenal stands at the forefront of merging data engineering with AI and machine learning, and not just to innovate, but substantially elevate both business processes and product development. So, most of you know SurveyMonkey, the platform where Mino plays a pivotal role as a VP of data. And today I'm just super excited to have her here. So, welcome to the show, Mino.
Hi, Serena. Thank you so much for inviting me on your show. I'm super excited to be here as well.
So today we're just so excited to discuss about how Mino and her team at SurveyMonkey harness vast amount of feedback data and turn it into actionable insight that shape product development and drive business growth. I also want to ask her more about how do you do storytelling in the realm of AI and machine learning, and how data literacy can empower entire organization and emphasize on data driven, ethical. But definitely, before we start, can you please share with us a little bit about your background and your path to where you are today as VP of data at SurveyMonkey?
Absolutely. So it's a long story, but let me see if I can cut it short a little bit for you. So I started in this area about 24 years ago, and I came into it by chance. It wasn't something I started off with. I just stepped into it by chance. And as I went about the journey, I realized I really had a passion for it and I enjoyed it. And I essentially thought that I have to make a career in this. I've continued my growth. I have worked across multiple industries very intentionally in order to gain experience around how different businesses use data and how can I enable enterprises to be more data driven in different industries itself. It also helps me stay very stimulated and challenged because I have to learn a new business model every time I enter a new industry. And so it has been fun so far. My journey is still on and I have a lot more to do and a lot more to achieve. And with AI coming into the forefront of everything that we do now, a lot of the things that we used to do with data has changed and or shifted. There is a
Mhm.
lot more to do in the space. And yeah, I'm excited to share more about this as we go on.
Yeah, I believe if you started 24 years ago, there's no such thing even as a data analytic. Am I right? It
I
is.
don't know. So to be very honest, at that point, all I knew is that there were SQL developers and database administrators, and even the
Mm,
concept like of a data engineer wasn't that big at that time.
right.
So we all were SQL developers because a data engineer was essentially someone who built like a SQL data pipeline. The tools then came in slowly, and the concept of data engineering actually started coming out. But no, at that point, everything was very new, very nascent. It's not as crazy as it is right now.
Right. I think right after I graduate college, I feel like data analytic has become very popular. And I even signed up for a few classes, just like an introductory to like data analytic. And I just feel like it was just starting to get popular. But like until now, it's literally AI is data, right? So that's why I'm so excited to have you on today to share with us all of the golden nuggets. Can you just share with me what's your day to day as a VP of data at SurveyMonkey?
Yeah. So my day to day essentially, so my responsibilities are around setting the strategy for data and analytics across the organization. So to ensure that we have the data in the right format, in an ethical, like it's
Mm-hmm.
governed in a governed format. We have
Mm-hmm.
everyone within the organization who is adopting the data. They trust the data that I actually put out, and there are no concerns in terms of the quality of the data itself. And then, in addition, this data should help them drive decision making within the organization
Mm-hmm.
itself. So it's not that we use the data just purely for reporting, but the intent is for them to gather insights and look for opportunities within the data so that the strategy of the organization can be driven off of the data that we are producing. In my day to day, that's my responsibility to ensure that that completely happens. So I have a motto called adoption, trust, and value. It's an eight principle, that's what I call it. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's to ensure that whatever I build out is rightly adopted, is trusted by the organization, and is generating value.
Oh, that's so cool. So you are building your program just revolving of all of the data that you guys have. I am wondering, like, how do you strategize building like this platform or this program, and to ensure that it's useful for the organization? Like, how do you even start?
So I started from when I started to where I am right now. I almost have a playbook of how to begin and how to get started for the
Nice.
organizations to be organized. But if you look at it, the core concept of it is essentially the ability for the data to be organized or modeled in a way that is
Right.
very readily accessible and readable by the end users. Because
Mm-hmm.
you can bring all the data together and create a big data lake, a lake or a data swamp. But if the
Mm-hmm.
data is not easily accessible, it is of no use to the organization because the only people looking at it are probably the data people. But what you want is the organization to be able to access that data so that they can once self serve each other, become more productive, and they start understanding the nature of the data and then start doing more with the data itself. And the second thing that essentially I know, so we call it the modeling layer that we call, it's called a semantic layer. And a semantic layer is
Mm-hmm.
nothing but a business view layer of the data
Right.
itself. The second thing that we do or I ensure is essentially to make sure that the key metrics that are used within the organization are very consistently defined within my data layer. And if they're
Mm-hmm.
defined, then there is no question in terms of the data when it goes out for reporting that anyone says, hey, the data that's coming out of our system is incorrect or it does not match what we have, because we ensure that we have the alignment between all of our stakeholders that this is the
Mm-hmm.
right version of what the data should look like. And so it makes for much, much more trusted reporting that comes out of the system. The third thing, and as you all know, like data quality is the cornerstone of anything that
Right.
you build out. So if your data is not of the right quality, any data models that you produce, any AI that you produce is not going to be accurate. And so data quality is of very premium importance. And then, of course, privacy and governance that surrounds the data itself.
Oh
To
yeah.
ensure that you have the data that is governed. So if there is customer information, the customer information is masked and is hidden and is not accessible by everyone. And then you also have the concept of where you have tools. So users are actually able to have tools that they can come in and use the data, and you provide the education so that they're able to use the tools and the data itself. So that's where you mentioned literacy a little ahead used. And
Right.
we can talk about literacy a little more, but literacy is very important as well, because you can have the
Mm-hmm.
data and you can have the tools ready, But if the
Right.
users don't know how to access it, they don't have the education to access it, then
Definitely.
it's not useful. So to add that value, you have to have a literacy program to start educating the users to use the data the most optimally.
So I really love the playbook that you share. But then, in terms of like data literacy, is there any approach that it's easier to break down at any new organization who like maybe like a startup to incorporate with like data literacy and also the playbook that you've shared to any small organization to help them build their product or services or even just to help optimizing the process for the organization?
Yeah. So there I look at literacy. So there are two core components of literacy itself. So there is
Mhm.
one which I call the back to basics and then the regular training itself. Now the back to
Right.
basics is what I think every organization forgets to focus on. And what the
Mhm.
back to basics essentially encompasses is an understanding of what our business truly is and
Mhm.
what the
Okay.
key measures of our business are, like what are our success metrics, basically to
Mhm.
have an understanding of that. And you
Mhm.
would be very surprised that a lot of people within the organization don't understand how the data, like how the data looks like, how the data is measured. So even if they look at a report, they don't know, they're like, I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yes,
And if you
definitely.
don't know what you're looking at, then there is no way you can use it effectively in your job. So my first thing is first understand how the business operates, understand
Mhm.
what each metric means, where it is coming from, and what it translates to in terms of business success. And
Mhm.
then you start going and starting to understand, okay, what else can I do with this? So that's like my first piece of it. And then within back to basics is also ethics. So understanding that how can you use the data ethically? Every organization essentially has customers, and with customers comes customer data. So how do you very ethically and with taking into account governance and privacy, make sure that you're using the data appropriately because they are going to get access to the data. How do we ensure that they are maintaining the data with the
Mhm.
same kind of security that we have maintained the data as well? With these two, essentially, I believe the organization gets ready to get access to that larger data set. So this is one piece of it. The second piece of the literacy program is around educating folks. Okay, how do you truly do analysis on top of this data? How do you visualize the data? And the most important is how do you do storytelling on top of the data? Because
Right.
you can look at a report and look at numbers, but then how do you
Yeah.
translate that into action or how do you translate that into impact? That is the biggest piece of it. And it's a very rare skill. And a lot of people don't have the ability to tell that story from where it starts to where it ends and then what has happened in the journey. Again, telling them or teaching them about that becomes again the second component of the data literacy program itself.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So like you said, like storytelling in data is very important as well. Do you have any strategies to like share within the organization of the data that you have?
So I would say, like one tip, I think most people fear data for the reason that they feel they get very overwhelmed or they think that it is very complicated. The thing is, if you take the logic and sorry, if you take out the mathematics out of it and
Mhm.
just think that, hey, these are the metrics with which we operate. So if you connect your job and what you do to it rather
Mhm.
than focusing on the math of the numbers, it just becomes that much more easier for you to be able to tell the story because you are really good at your job. And if you understand the data as related to your job, then you should be able to tell the story and say, hey, this metric basically gets impacted by these different things that I'm doing in my job. And that's the reason why we are seeing it going up, or that's the reason why we see it go down. And if you are able to do that, then you can define, like from what happened, you can define action and impact.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
you know that this is one thing that is driving this to go up, then hey, let's go do it again. Let's repeat that success. Or if it's going down, then hey, let's stop doing this because obviously it's not helping. The thing is that don't fear it, just embrace it. Know that this is something that is not hard if you associate it with the job that you do and associate it with
Right.
something. So in the back to basics, we teach people as to how that metric associates to their job so that they can connect the dots on it. because we remove the math out of it. We just associate it with what they do on a daily basis, and it makes it much more simple. And once you know that, then storytelling becomes easier. Now within storytelling itself, one is like your verbal storytelling, and then of course you have your presentation. Your visual storytelling of course requires to you to be able to tell the story through pictures, so people can slowly get an understanding of what's there, and that requires a little skill, and it is something that you can develop over time. But once you have it in your head as to what the story is, then you just have to become a little more creative to put it down on paper and be able to present on that.
Always, as in marketing, we do look a lot of like data, especially if we do any of campaigns, because data speak for itself, what works and what doesn't work. How do we utilizing the majority of data overall to help us to incorporate in our marketing campaign or even like our sales pipeline? Do you have any strategies that would be able to help with that? Looking into data and how it can help us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if you look at or think about clicks and impressions, they are more top of funnel. So
Yes.
that is, as you get, if someone visits your website, then you mark that as a click or an impression, and you essentially are looking at top of funnel. But what you are thinking also is that, is this top of funnel customer, what or how their behavior is, so that they are able to convert for you, and so that you're attracting the right kind of visitors to your website itself.
Yes.
And for that, you need basically an understanding of much deeper or much lower in the funnel data that essentially exists. So all you need to do, and again, I always associate everything with each function. So for example, if your focus and your area of expertise is on the top of funnel, you need to get at least a broad based understanding of what the other components of the rest of the funnel are, and look at the data. So if you see that during the funnel, there is a massive drop off. So you bring in 100% of folks to the website, but then by the time they get to the next phase of the funnel, they are already at 10 or 12%. Something is wrong. You have either attracted the wrong number of visitors, it's the wrong type of visitors, or you have the wrong content and they're basically getting kicked out. And so you just have now stepped into that next piece of the funnel. But say, suppose your funnel looks pretty good, like all the way towards the end, and the issues are not with, they have actually converted, and the issues are now with where the support is getting hit with issues. So say the product has issues and support is, people are hitting support and saying, hey, the product is problematic. And because the product is problematic, there are a lot of issues on social media about your product itself. Then what happens? That causes issues with who's going to visit your site, because that may reduce the number of impressions or clicks, because people go and look for reviews and all of a sudden they're seeing like, oh my God, this product is a problem. So you have to be able to associate and tie that data back and say that, how do I connect these two for myself? Now for that, you need access to both the sets of data and with the ability to see what that full funnel looked like, so that within each phase of the funnel, you say, hey, this what happened here has potentially impacted what has happened at the top of funnel over there.
Oh, I love it. I love it how you put it into an example. It's just so much easier to understand. But yeah, definitely. So when we talk about your playbook, you did mention about the ethical and also privacy of our clients and or privacy of the data. So can you just please share with me what are the steps that you can do to ensure the privacy of the data that we have?
So one thing is with data usage, you have to understand like what the data use policy is. So what the customer has actually agreed to in the terms and agreements of the conditions of the site itself, in terms of how their data can essentially be used. So one thing you always have to do is the ability to track the lineage of the data. So irrespective of whether your data is just going on to a data layer for dashboarding, or if it is going to become a model, like a machine learning model or an AI model, irrespective of that, you have to have the ability to track the lineage of that data, like where exactly this data is coming from. Because tomorrow, if the data is in question, you can very easily answer that question. The second thing you have to understand is the profile of the data. So specifically around customers, if you heard, there is a lot of bias that exists within the data where some people feel that the reason why the AI reacts in a certain way is because when it was trained, it was not very equally profiled. And so you have to ensure that of your data is appropriate in a way that it serves the purpose of what you are exactly looking at. And for me, if you have those are like your cornerstones to be able to one tag the data that goes into any of your models or goes into any of your data sets, and that comes through the lineage of your data itself. And the second is the fact, the ability that your data is profiled in a way that when it is used for anything externally, that it provides the full picture of what the data actually has. And so it behaves then accordingly when it is put forth into a model itself. And then from a privacy and governance standpoint, as I said, like we have to ensure the usage policy is completely adhered to. So you use the data only for what the customer has agreed that your data is used for, and for nothing else. And when
So
you,
when
yes.
so when you collecting data from the clients, do you really have to ensure to let the client know what are you collecting the data for? And because you said you have to get an agreement from the clients, right? But throughout the process, do you have to think ahead of time to, okay, let the clients what are these data would be able to use for?
Yeah. So you have to, right? Like that, if
Yeah.
you realize, like with GDPR and CCPA, which have come in, that has become more and more important because the client consent is asked for everything. Like, hey, do you want just the functional cookies? Do you want the analytics cookies? What kind of cookies do you
Right.
allow us to
Yeah.
collect from you? So there are limits to what data can be collected and gathered, and you give essentially the customer access, like basically access to dictate as to what you can actually do with their data, like once we have collected that information. So there is a lot of that comes up. So yes, we have to model our data ecosystems in a way that it's easy that tomorrow if a customer comes, then we have the ability to take their data out. If they say, hey, don't want you to use my data in marketing, or I don't use my data for analytics, then we have an ability to go in and take that data out. So that has become very prominent. Like every data leader within the space is essentially designing with this in mind. And it's a lot of policy and it's a lot of process, and it has become cumbersome. If you have a data system that was a little older, then you have to build all of that into it, and consider that. But if you look at the modern data architecture, there are considerations essentially made for this so that it allows for us to easily essentially manage that.
Yeah, that's interesting just coming from the customer's point of view because like I click on a lot website and there was like, are you allowing cookies? Are you allowing this and that? But what would that allow when I click allow? What am I allowing them to?
Retail, like if your cookie is collected, there's a lot of your demographic that gets collected. When Google Analytics, like if Google tracks your cookie itself through the website, in some cases, Google is also able to provide like basic demographic information about you. Sometimes they know the things about you, right? Because that's how they display ads based on your behavior. So there is a lot that they're gathering and collecting, and they provide that information. So there's data all around. Your only bet is where you try to see, like you understand as to when you are providing your data, you're reading and making sure that you're not giving your data to folks whom you're not comfortable providing your data and or information to. But
Yeah,
unfortunately, the nature of how the world has become right now,
it is. It's so
this
hard.
kind of, it's very hard for you to go and pinpoint, oh my God, I need to take my data out of here. A lot of
Yeah.
people like come in, for example, they get bombarded with say marketing emails and they
Yeah.
find it like super creepy or something. They will just go back to that specific company and say, hey, you know what, I'm getting multiple emails, just take my stuff out. They won't just unsubscribe, they'll be
Unsubscribe.
like, just take everything out and
Yeah.
so I don't get bombarded with this again. So there are all kinds of things that are possible right now. So with, again, as I said, with CCPA and GDPR, that has become much more, what to say, there is much more policy around it, and there is much more support for the customer itself around it, and every organization has to kind of build it with that in
Yeah.
mind, that down the line it could potentially happen.
Yeah,
But then people are also running a business. You have to
it
figure out
is.
that right balance of,
Yeah, the
okay, how do
balance.
we manage and how do we do it in case of data that we lose. So
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Like you heard stories like Slack, which is, oh, we're just gonna use all of the data
exactly.
and put it into our machine learning. And if you want to opt out, you have to like submit whatever it is. But I didn't get any like an email or saying that this is what's
Yeah, see, the
happening.
only thing they
You
did,
know what?
the only thing they
Yes,
probably did is they sent you like, hey, we have a new privacy use policy. And that's, of course, like the 15, 20 page document. I don't know
right.
if anyone actually reads any of those.
I personally I won't.
Yeah,
Because I
exactly.
know that what else can I do if I don't agree to the term, I won't be able to use it. So it is a little bit like, yes, there are like a standard agreements and all of that, but it's also the system. But it is very hard. Like I said, it is not easy to, like, you have a business you run, you need the data. Just to balancing it out is challenging. Yeah, but let's talk more into in the AI space. What do you feel like, especially when we talk about like an agreement you can use, but like this open source, right? So open source, all of the data you can learn, everybody would able to use that data to learn. And even like I use Perplexity AI a lot for me. I just noticed that if I use it a lot over time, a certain term that I use a lot, it automatically pop up, right? And so I am just wondering, and it related to certain like property, right? And but I am just wondering in terms of like in the AI space, in the systems, do you feel like is there any like safeguards that you're able to utilize, especially if you want to incorporate the open source into your organization?
Yeah, safeguards. So one thing you have to realize with AI and the nature in which it is right now, till
Mm-hmm.
it has actually got proven lineage from whatever
Mm,
it is that you're accessing, your data is potentially not safe. So you should not be putting any data that's either proprietary or that requires has secure access. So you have to be really careful about using that. And so
mhm.
there are considerations put into play as we bring in AI tools within the organization, and
Right.
to ensure that we have a full understanding of where and how our data is actually being utilized. And if we have any sense that, hey, it's a little unclear, but the tool needs to be brought in, then there has to be real clarity around that. Hey, you cannot put this data in the system. The only kind of questions you can ask are these, which are more generic in nature. Yes, from an AI standpoint, like I know that these tools are evolving. They're getting much more to the point of where they'll get more comfortable for usage within enterprises itself.
Mm,
But in my honest opinion, I feel that there is still a lot lacking. At the AI summit that we were there, the project manager from NVIDIA, he spoke and he said that essentially each of their models are essentially tagged. So if you use any of their models, you exactly know what kind of training data they used and then how your data is going to be purposed. And if you start seeing such lineage coming out of these open source models, then the comfort level increases a little bit. And then you start to understand that, hey, you know what? I now feel comfortable sharing this data because I know exactly where my data is going. But till that point, there is a level of risk that is associated with using these
mhm.
models. So my advice would be just be a little cautious and understanding of what is at play till before you start putting your data out there against each of these models.
Oh, that's so awesome. I know that we're running a bit out of time, but I really appreciate for all of the golden nuggets that you shared, all of your playbooks, and teaching us how you can use data literacy and the safety of usage of AI and data as well. So really appreciate you. Thank you so much, Mino, to be on the show today. And I learned a lot. I took some notes. And definitely can come back and also rewatch this as well. Thank you so much for being on here today with me. If you have to give one for anybody who are new into going into learning about data or what they can use for their data, within their organization? Is there one that you can share, quickly?
I think the fact that you talked about learning itself, I just say that keep learning and keep growing. The space is evolving every single minute of the day, and it is so hard to keep up and catch up. What
Mhm.
I do essentially is I rely a lot on the digests that come out from a lot of people, right? Like people put articles together of all the evolving technology, and I read through it very quickly during the day. So I have an understanding of everything that's in the space.
Mhm.
And if I have interest in something, I go a little more into detail. But till then, I just keep myself very satisfied with summaries. So
Mhm.
continue to do that. The space is only going to grow and it's not going anywhere. And again, as I said, learn to embrace it. This is
Awesome.
going to change the nature of your job. And
Uh-huh.
you have to realize that with it, you are also going to have to change the nature of how you do your job. I would say that's the one learning that I would tell everyone to do and take. That's the advice I would.
And who do you follow to, with all of your reading for up to date
I
in the
have a
AI
lot of AI
space?
influencers, but the one person I really admire is Ali Miller. I
Mhm.
really enjoy her posts, and she has made a big name in the AI space, and she gives her very candid accounts of everything within AI. I love following her and looking at her guidance essentially.
Thank you so much, Meenal. Really appreciate you to come on to our show today. All right.
Thank you so much, Serena, for the opportunity. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right.